Yeager from Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3D. Hey, Dan, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Welcome to Niagara Falls.
Thank you.
Is this
Good
your
to be
first
here.
time being here?
I was here when I was 3.
3.
I have no real recollection. I'm sure I enjoyed it.
Yeah, and right now you're getting to see the view, and you have a nice hotel
Yeah, it's quite a
room
view.
view. Yeah.
It is quite a view.
Oh yeah. Have you been down close?
No,
Not yet, eh?
no.
Oh.
I've shivered in the mist.
You shivered in the mist, eh?
But, yeah.
Well, I'm before you go, just go down there if you
Oh,
can
yeah.
get that
Yeah, no,
opportunity.
definitely.
You get to see that and feel the rumble,
Uh-huh.
of the falls
I like
right under your feet. It's quite something for sure. So my condolences for Tobey and of course Gunnar and Marilyn, and you work with those people, you know who they are.
Well, thank
And,
you. Yeah, they were all good friends. Gunnar became a bit of a mentor to me. He was really a great guy. Marilyn was incredible to work with. I remember I met Toby the night our movie opened at a party at the producer's house, and that was quite an experience. Just because I had become such a huge, admirer of his work. I never, I'd been aware of Texas Chainsaw since high school, and never really thought about the people who had actually made it. It was always just this thing, and a very cool thing. But then, as I started to work on the movie, to really get into the fact that this is a work of art by some really talented individuals, and Toby grew large in my personal mythology, and then I met him at this party. And he was, I've heard so many conflicting stories about who he was, but the one thing I remember is after sitting there through several cigars that evening, telling stories, listening to his stories, we talked about Texas Chainsaw 3D, and he was very pleased. But at the end of the night, it was 3 in the morning, and I was dead tired and had to leave, and stood up to leave. And he gets up too, and he says, I have to hug you. And it was so, yeah, and he did, and he was just a sweet guy. And it really conflicted with stories I'd heard about him. But anyway, I didn't mind. I took that, I need no more validation as far
Sure.
as Texas Chainsaw 3D goes than Toby Hooper hugged me. So.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. So you took on this role of Leatherface. Obviously, you'd watched the previous movies to sort of get in the mindset of what the character actually, who he was.
Mm-hmm.
The film itself actually had a lot of, the 3D I'm talking, had a lot of the same elements from the first film.
Mm-hmm.
So what, with your way of acting, did Gunnar Hansen, was he able to help you with, or did you already know what you were doing, or were there, did he guide you in respects to how you were acting?
I met Gunnar about the 3rd week of shooting.
Okay.
However, he did inform everything I knew about the character. I studied everything he wrote, everything he said in interviews, and watched the movie obsessively, and noting every movie made, and I told him, to his face, I said I ripped you off as mercilessly as I could. Because I loved the character that he had created, and I give him complete credit for creating him. And by the time I get the character, in Texas Chainsaw 3D, Leatherface has gone through some significant life changes. In the original movie, for instance, he's really the dedicated instrument of the will of others. Everybody tells him what to do, and he doesn't really make any decisions. He decides what mask to wear, how to present himself. That's his expression. That's the limit of his expression. And so by the time I get the character in 3D, he's actually been forced now to to have a point of view. Because Gunnar said, you know, his take on who Leatherface was is, or was, if you remove the mask, there's nobody there.
Mm-hmm.
The mask was the character. And we removed the mask, and there had to be somebody there.
For
You know,
sure,
that was the evolution we took the character through.
Mm-hmm.
And people remark all the time that they're surprised at themselves for suddenly caring about Leatherface at the end of this movie. But it's because he becomes a person. You know, I mean, the few things that from the original movie I think that really inform who Leatherface is the scene where the hitchhiker and Leatherface go upstairs to get Grandpa for dinner, and they bring him down, they carry him in the wheelchair, and they set him up at the table. They got Sally tied up there, and Leatherface, you know, pats Grandpa on the head and kisses him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, that's who he is. He's a loving character, and I think that surprises people when they really delve into who he is. So.
And with the whole Ed Gein, and I don't know, I always get that name wrong. Is it Gein or Gein?
I say Gein.
Everybody says Gein. Yeah.
I don't know.
Did you have to read anything about him as well to kind of figure out the Leatherface character?
No. I mean,
Okay.
I've been interested in Ed Gein for a long time anyway, just because he's a singular individual.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think, other than some quirky little, you know, idiosyncrasies, I don't think they're analogous characters. You know, Ed Gein had his own issues, but he was a fairly sociable, gregarious guy.
Yeah.
He was well liked in his community. He just had a thing for, you know, some unsavory activities.
Yeah.
And an unnatural relationship with his mother. I mean, that's the Norman Bates of it all.
The Norman Bates, yeah, of course. Yeah. So did you see Texas first, like a long time ago before it ever came out, or did you see it during the time that you were hired, or, you know, that you were cast for?
Yeah, the first time I saw Texas Chainsaw Massacre was 1981.
Okay.
And I had known about it for a few years before that. I was just, you know, in high school, and we'd heard about this movie, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's been banned, you know, it's
Yeah.
forbidden to watch. And then it came, my family had moved to Las Vegas, Nevada. And it came to the drive-in, so I got all my buddies together. I said, we got to see this movie. And so we went to the drive-in and saw it for the very first time. And it was probably within 6 months after that, my mother went out and bought a VHS machine. It was the new thing back then. And I went out and bought 2 VHS tapes to have and to hold and to own and to wear out. One was Eraserhead by David Lynch.
Oh, yeah.
And the
Jeez.
other was
Yeah.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So I have a long history with the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I loved it. I wore it out. I used to have an old Philco Predicta, which was a TV that was on the yoke that had the swivel
Right.
screen.
Yeah, I
You know,
remember,
I
yeah.
had one of those, and I used to watch it on that just because I loved, you know, the black and white. It was cool. Anyway, yeah, no, I have a long history with Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
So now we're coming on to the 3D aspect of it, okay? So this movie was in 3D. There were certain things in the movie. One part where you actually throw the saw at the
Yes.
cop. Just tell us how that shot went
Well,
on set.
yeah, as you may have guessed, it is a bit of movie magic.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing about shooting a movie in 3D and the 3D as a cinematic tool is you don't. The impulse is always to poke stuff and throw things at the audience and involve them in the story. And that's exactly contrary to good cinema theory. You know, is don't break the fourth wall. You know,
Right.
keep that, you know, let them remain objective. And the problem is if you're making a 3D horror movie and you don't at least throw a chainsaw at people, they're disappointed. So we had to throw the chainsaw. And chainsaws are expensive, and this was really a low budget movie as you know, for shooting a full feature horror movie in 3D. It was low budget.
Right,
I mean,
right.
We did it in record time and for record money. I mean, it was a brilliant crew. But yeah, we wouldn't throw a real chainsaw.
Okay.
Because we didn't have one to spare, you know. I mean, we had 2 of each type of chainsaw, and we couldn't afford to break one.
Right.
So it's shot in multiple layers. The first one, you have the real chainsaw, and you just fake the throw, and you don't let go of it. And then the prop guys measured my hands when I was holding the chainsaw, and they made me this little rig. It was 2 dowels with a piece of steel in between them, and that held my hands correctly. And then I threw that.
Right, right.
And then they kind of followed that trajectory digitally. The 3D guys, the special effects guys were there, and they tracked where that thing went and how it was going to fly. And they came up with, you know, a little 3D model of the chainsaw and inserted that, and it made it look like, oh, it's a flying chainsaw.
Okay, so you throw it at the cop,
Yes.
but why wouldn't you have thrown it at the girl that's trying to get away? I'm just curious. I mean, she was right there, hanging on to the.
It's his motivation.
Okay.
I mean, he didn't want to. I mean, the last thing in the world he would want to do is let go of the chainsaw.
True. Yeah.
And the one thing about Leatherface that people don't really, you know, keep in mind is that he's constantly terrified. People scare the hell out of him. He's very frightened all the time. And he, of course, reacts in an unnatural way with that fear, not in recoiling, but in violent, you know, aggression.
Sure.
You know, he's still profoundly lethal. But, yeah, it wasn't until, you know, he had no choice, you know, I mean, you know, the guy had a gun on him. Right, right. You know, and that he's a country boy. He knows the score, and you know, as the deputy utters, you know, a chainsaw don't make you bulletproof. So.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's
he knows.
Yeah,
he knew
yeah.
that very well.
Good point. Yeah.
But don't just bring a gun to a chainsaw
fight. So quickly, okay, so we take the story back to the original time, and then it comes back 20 years later. It's the girl is your cousin, and at the end of the film, again, there's a part where
they're trying.
You're the one You're the one that's tied up in the chains.
They're trying to drag.
And they're trying to drag the meat
grinder.
The meat grinder. She comes in and saves you after you didn't really kill her.
Saved her. Yeah.
And then she throws you the saw.
Do your thing, cuz, the most reviled line of the movie.
Do your thing, cuz.
Or the most loved. It depends on who you ask. But anyway, yeah.
And so that's pretty much a pivotal moment in the film where it's like, okay, now the relationship between you and your cousin is like the saw is family. How can they carry on another part after that?
Well, there are all sorts of things in the story left to be explored.
Yes.
You know,
lots of questions unanswered.
Yeah, it's a blood feud.
Right.
Really, I mean, that's what they were setting up with our movie, and there's a script for the sequel to 3D, which they haven't made yet, and I don't know if they ever will.
Oh, okay, all right.
It's really great. You understand the dynamic of what's going on in this town and how they've dealt with the fact that, you know, entire families can be slaughtered, and the guy who's responsible ends up the mayor. It's a different place. You know,
for sure.
It's a different kind of place. It's not necessarily traditional Texas values, but it's fun to explore it. And yeah, I don't know if that'll ever get made, but it would be interesting. I enjoyed the script when I read it. So.
Talk about the conditions quickly and tell us if there were any fun blooper, anything that happened on set that was a lot of fun that maybe you guys were like laughing your asses off at certain things. And
Yeah, I don't know. You know,
No?
Leatherface was taken very seriously in
Okay.
this whole shooting movie. There was none of the
joking around.
cutting up of. I mean, I was really impressed, and I don't know, maybe a little. I don't know. It certainly affected me. I noticed that, you know, that I had a team of people who would handle the mask and the chainsaws and the wardrobe and everything. And when I'd step on set, people treated me differently. I mean, you know, I've told people that the Leatherface character has so many great little actor shortcuts to the character. You know, usually you have to kind of work at staying in the character as you're going through a scene with Texas. You know, playing Leatherface. You know, you put on the mask and it's there. You're done. You know, the trick is knowing what it means as an actor and what to do with it. But yeah, even this crew, you know, would react to, you know, me walking out in a skin mask and carrying a chainsaw. You know,
Wow.
it's yeah.
It's not the same. It sounds like every time, like I've interviewed Steve Dash, I've interviewed C.J. Graham. I mean, the Friday the 13th seems a little bit different from what you're telling me anyway on this.
Yeah. I mean, they were a bunch of kids. Most of the other actors in the movie, and so you know, I kind of kept to myself. You know, never really. I mean, we had a couple of parties, and that was fun. The one meeting of an actor on the movie that I'll always remember is Marilyn. I met her on the set. We were in the mansion. She was going to do the part where she's writing the letter in bed, and then she does the voiceover.
Oh yeah.
And then the only other thing we had to shoot was I had to put her back in her coffin and rebury her.
Okay.
And we shot the entire thing, from carrying her out of the house down the steps and carrying her back to the graveyard and putting her in the coffin, closing the lid, and burying her. We shot that entire thing. And the only thing you see in the movie, though, is a little snippet of he's you know, shoveling a little dirt on the grave.
Oh, okay.
And so you know that's what happened. And the reason they didn't use that was because it was so horrendously tragic. And there was just no way to use it in the movie. It was an emotional, horrendously sad, and it was the exact wrong thing for that point in the movie. So they couldn't really use it. They just used that little piece of just, you know, kicking the dirt over the grave. But when we shot it, I mean, you know, we rehearsed how to, you know, it's hard to put somebody into the grave. The coffin's in the ground.
Sure.
And so she and I rehearsed that thing, and I remembered that point where Leatherface had kissed Grandpa on the head, and I thought, oh, he's going to kiss Grandma on the head. And so I do this, and I mean, there was weeping. It was so tragic. It was just wrong for the movie, but we shot it, and it was an incredible experience to go through that as an actor. And when I had met Marilyn, you know, she was just the sweetest little old lady I had ever met, and she came up and she took my hand, she patted my hand, and she was just so sweet. And you know, she was Grandma. I said, oh, this is gonna be great. And she, you know, so I got to go through that. And it wasn't until the following year, she had called me on the phone and to ask me about some event that was coming up for Texas Chainsaw, and asked me if I was going. But I noticed that she was really on the phone, you know, she was just this kind of sexy, vivacious, and flirtatious woman, not Grandma anymore. And I thought it was really strange. And I had run into her at events a couple of times subsequent. And I realized, on set, she made me bury my own grandmother. And that was awesome. I mean, it was just, you don't get chances to work with people like that very often.
Yeah.
I will forever be grateful to her for that gift.
That's awesome. Wow, what a story. That's awesome. So I want to change gears a little bit. You were on Sharknado 4,
Yes.
The Fourth Awakens.
Yes.
My buddy Joe Quintanilla,
Uh-huh.
you know Joe?
Sure.
Yeah. He's also involved in that whole Sharknado thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to just say his name because I love Joe. He's a great
Joe's
guy.
cool.
Oh, yeah, he's a
I
great
haven't
guy.
seen him in a while.
Yeah. I actually called him this morning to
Yeah.
let him know that you guys got here safe.
Oh, good.
But so, what was your role on that film? Just quickly, if you could just tell us.
A buddy of mine was the prop guy on all the Sharknado movies, and Anthony, the writer, well, one of the writers and director, is a huge Texas Chainsaw fan, and which is why there are chainsaws in Sharknado. And he had this idea of doing a real homage to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and so they wrote this scene because the Sharknado was finally going across Texas and turning into an oil NATO and all that.
Yeah, yeah.
And the kids need some more chainsaws, and they happen into a chainsaw shop, and so it was a whole homage to Carolyn Williams was Stretch, and
Yeah, sure.
they ended up getting Dog the Bounty Hunter to play Chop Top.
Good old
basically.
Dwayne.
Yeah, he was a cool guy. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But I think Bill Mosley was busy or something. I don't know. Anyway, my buddy who was the prop guy, they were puzzling on how they were going to get Leatherface. And
Right.
He says, he's a friend of mine. And so they said, well, can you call him? And, yeah. So he calls me up and he says, remember I said we were going to do a Sharknado movie and maybe you could be in it? And this had been months gone by. I said, oh, yeah. He says, well, what are you doing Sunday? This was on a Thursday. I said, oh, no, I'm free. So we went and we shot this thing. And Anthony named the big hulking brute in the background Gunner.
There you go.
In honor of Gunner Hansen.
That's
And
awesome.
So I said, yeah, I'll do it. I'm happy to do it. But it was fun.
That's awesome.
Got to look menacing and all that, which I like to do.
That's great. So what are you doing now? I understand you got a film coming up that you want to promote here.
Oh,
and,
yeah,
we
well-
got your little thing on the side there. I'd love to. Slaughter Farm. There
Yeah,
you go.
no, we
Bloody hell.
We have Bad Anger Pictures has 4 scripts in development. Slaughter Farm seems to be in the lead on the race to get produced, but we have a couple of others too, and a few more stories we're developing. There's just and I wrote it. I hope to get to direct it. We'll see. It's always a challenge. We're going to try and do a few shorts, because I've been making movies all my life, but try and tell that to a bank without, I mean, I've lost most of the movies I've ever made. They're long gone. They were made back in the 80s on VHS
Oh, wow.
recorders and old fashioned.
Great.
But
Oh,
anyway.
that
Yeah,
sucks.
They weren't that good.
Oh well.
So it's probably best they were always funny though.
Yeah.
I will admit that. But we have Slaughter Farm, a few cryptozoological tales that I find fascinating for some reason. I never thought I would, and a couple of zombie movies. So it's all good horror fun.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, where can people find you?
They can find us on Facebook. That's easy. Facebook. What is my Facebook? I think
Dan Yeager.
Dan Yeager Leatherface or something. I don't know. You got to have a website that has a link on it somewhere. Maybe Google me. That's all.
Yeah.
I'm not technologically adept.
We'd like to thank you very much for doing this.
thank you for having me.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for tolerating my droning on and on.
Oh gosh, no, it was amazing. You had a great interview. It was awesome. Thank you very much from me and the crew, and enjoy the rest of Frightmare.
Thank you.